Hello, everyone. A very good morning. So, welcome to this Patch Tuesday webinar by Manage Engine. So, this is the first Patch Tuesday of the season. So, here's a quick intro about me. I'm Anupam Kundu, a product specialist at Manage Engine, and today I'll be your presenter. I'm also assisted by an expert panel who would be willing and be more than happy to answer all your queries regarding the webinar, the presentation, as well as any of our products. So if you have any queries or questions during the presentation, during the webinar, please feel free to ask via chat. Also, this is a quick 60-minute session and this webinar is being recorded. So once the webinar is complete, the recording of the webinar as well as the slide deck of the presentation will be shared via mail to your registered email IDs in 1 to 2 working days. So with that being said, let's take a quick look at the agenda of today's webinar. So first up, we'll have a quick glance at the latest ransomware attacks as well as the number of vulnerabilities reported recently. Followed by that, we'll have a look at the end of life dates for the various Windows versions. And then we'll have a detailed breakdown of January 2023's Patch Tuesday updates. After that, we'll be demonstrating how you can simplify patch management for your enterprise's network by using Manage Engine Patch Manager Plus. And we'll also be sharing the best practices for patch management in a hybrid network. And last but not least, certainly, we'll have a live question and answer session wherein me as well as the panelists, our expert panel, would be answering all your queries related to patch management, our products, as well as the presentation. All right, so let's start with the ransomware stats as well as the vulnerability stats. Now, as per stats in 2022, a total of 105 countries fell prey to the ransomware attacks. And all of these countries had the local governments being attacked by these ransomware attacks in the cyber. Now, the number grew drastically by approximately 36% when we compare it to 2021, wherein in 2021, we just saw 77 countries falling prey to these attacks. Moving on, we see 2023 started with an alarming news of a children's hospital being targeted by the Lockbit ransomware group. So as a consequence of the attack on the children's hospital, that is the Sick Kids Hospital, there were delays in receiving lab as well as imaging results, as well as longer wait times for the patients. However, the Lockbit gang has claimed that the attack was conducted by a rogue affiliate of the gang, and as a compensation, the Lockbit ransomware gang, provided a free decryptor to the hospital. Now, as of today, it hasn't been confirmed if the stolen data is being misused in any form. Next up, we see another attack of the Lockbit ransomware gang on the port of Lisbon. So the port of Lisbon, which is Portugal's third largest port, fell prey to the Lockbit attack on the Christmas Day last year. Now, while the Port of Lisbon administration stated that the attack hasn't affected any of their operations, Logbit has added the organization to its extortion site. And also, Logbit claims that they have stolen financial reports, audits, budgets, cargo information, as well as customer PII, that is customer personally identifiable information from the Port of Lisbon administration. And now moving on to the last but not least stat, that is 2022 saw a sharp 25% spike in the total number of vulnerabilities, while 2021 had reported 20,171 vulnerabilities. There have been a drastic increase of 25% this last year, that is a total of 25,226 vulnerabilities were reported in 2022. Now, such an alarming rise, such an alarming spike, iterates the dire need for proper patching and cyber hygiene for enterprises. Now, in this regard, we're glad to announce that Manage Engine's flagship endpoint management and security solution, that is Endpoint Central, now supports ransomware mitigation capabilities with the new anti-ransomware module. So this anti-ransomware module, that is Endpoint Central's ransomware protection capability, is still in the early access. And if you want to know more about it, please click on the link that has been shared in the chat. If you want a personalized demo of the ransomware protection capability, that is the anti-ransomware module of Endpoint Central, you can just drop in your email IDs in the chat box and we'll set up a demo session just for you. Right, so moving on, let's talk about the Microsoft support and the Windows lifecycle. So as we all know that the extended support update, that is the ESUs for Windows 7 expired on the 10th of January 2023. So we can officially say that Windows 7 is dead. Also, this Patch Tuesday, that is on the 10th of Jan, extended support updates for Server 2008 and 2008 R2 has also ended. But there's a good news that Microsoft says they will be providing one additional year of ESU support for Server 2008 and 2008 R2 if they have been running in Azure. That is, the instances of Server 2008 and 2008 R2, if they run on Azure, they would receive one additional year of ESU support from Microsoft. Apart from that, as you can see on your screens, Windows 8.1 also received the last support of the security support on the 10th of January, and its security support has already ended. So we can say that Windows 8.1 has also reached the end of life. So there would be two versions, that is Windows 10 and Windows 11 right now. And for Windows 10 version 21 H1 for enterprise and education, as well as Home Pro and Pro for workstations, the active support and security support ended on the 13th of the December month last year. So for users who are still on these old versions, it's highly recommended for security purposes that you migrate and upgrade to newer versions such as Windows 10 version 22H2 or Windows 11. Now moving further, let's talk about the Patch Tuesday update for this month. So here's a breakdown. Now this Patch Tuesday, a total of 101 vulnerabilities have been resolved by Microsoft. Now out of these 101 vulnerabilities, 98 of these are new and the other 3 are revisions to the CVIDs from November and December 2022. In addition, as you can see, these 98 vulnerabilities, if left unpatched, can cause 6 different impacts on the vulnerable systems. Also, a total of 122 patches have been released to mitigate these 98 vulnerabilities. Talking more about the Patch Tuesday updates, we see that luckily there has been just a 1 day that has been reported this month. So the 0-day vulnerability has been found in Windows Advanced Local Procedure Call and has been tracked as CVE 2023-21674. Now, this actively exploited vulnerability, do note that this is an actively exploited vulnerability and can cause elevation of privilege in the vulnerable systems. So as most of us are already aware, Windows Advanced Local Procedure Call is a high-speed message passing mechanism which is available only to Windows operating system components. So as per Microsoft's security advisory, this elevation of privilege vulnerability could lead to a browser sandbox escape, and an attacker who has successfully exploited this vulnerability could gain system privileges. I would like to tell you that it affects all Windows OS versions, that is the 0-day vulnerability affects all Windows versions starting from Windows 8.1 and Server 2012 R2. Now, the base score for this vulnerability is 8.8, which makes it a high severity bug. And although this is being actively exploited, the proof of concept hasn't been disclosed publicly yet. So I see a lot of guests joining right now. So for those who have been joining right now, if you have missed the earlier part of the webinar, there's no need to worry because the webinar is being recorded, and the recording of the webinar as well as the slide deck will be shared via mail to your registered email IDs in 1 to 2 working days. Now, once we are done with the critical vulnerabilities, let's discuss about the about the critical vulnerabilities. I beg your pardon. Okay, so out of the total 98 vulnerabilities that have been disclosed this Patch Tuesday, 11 of them are critical vulnerabilities. So this time it's a bit trying for IT admins out there with the 11 critical vulnerabilities, and that to 10 in Windows operating system itself. So I'll pause for a while while you make a note of the critical vulnerabilities as well as CVIDs found in Windows 7. So as you can see that the patches for these vulnerabilities have been rolled out as monthly rollups, and these can cause remote code execution as well as elevation of privilege if left unpatched. Moving on to the next slide of the critical vulnerabilities, we see some more for Windows 7, while just one for Microsoft SharePoint Server. Now, dear folks, in addition to the critical vulnerabilities, I would like to tell you about one more vulnerability that is been tracked as CVE 2023-21549. And it is important to note that Microsoft has also resolved this publicly disclosed vulnerability in Windows SMB Witness Service. I would like to reiterate that the publicly disclosed vulnerability in Windows SMB Witness Service has been tracked as CVE 2023-21549. And this elevation of privilege vulnerability could be exploited by executing a specially crafted a malicious script, which executes an RPC call to an RPC host. So although this has been publicly disclosed, there aren't any reports of active exploitation of the bug as of now. Now we'll continue our discussion on the Patch Tuesday for January 2023, but let's have a quick poll now. So I'll be starting a poll. You can open the chat and see on the chat poll section the first poll that has been started. So the question is, how do you manage patches in your organization? Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a quick answer on the poll? How do you manage patches in your organization, either manually or automatically, or you can use a patch management software to test, approve, and deploy? And if there's no formal patch management for your organizations, you can also specify the same. Waiting for a few while. I see 59 of the audiences have voted till now. So, all right, thank you for your votes. Thank you for the polls. Once we have seen the votes, we'll be going for the other poll based on the handling of patches in your environment. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who are joining now, I would just tell you that this webinar is being recorded and the recording would be shared to your registered email IDs in 1 to 2 working days. For now, please feel free to vote on the poll regarding how you manage patches in your organization. All right, thank you for your responses. Let's have another poll. Now, this poll talks about how would you handle patching if your users are held up with business critical tasks on their computers. So many times we have seen as IT admins, our job is to secure the environment. That's true. But again, our job is always to make sure there's no productivity drop in the organization. So how do we strike a fine balance between these two? It's tricky for us. And that's where lies the answers. You can either force to patch the systems, or you can allow for the end users to postpone, or you can just choose a self-service portal for pushing the patches. And in case you don't have a strategy in place yet, you can also vote for that as well. I see 53% of the audience has voted till now. Once we're done with the poll, we'll move on and we'll continue our discussion about the patches as well as the vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows as well as Microsoft Office. Also, I'd like to reiterate that if you have any questions regarding the Patch Tuesday webinar or patch management in general, or any of our solutions, please feel free to ask via chat. Our technical panel would be more than happy to answer. And if you need a demo of any of our products or anti-ransomware capabilities of Endpoint Central, please feel free to drop in your chat, email ID in the chat. Okay, so we are done. Now let's move ahead with our discussion on Patch Tuesday. So first, let's take a look at the operating systems and the applications affected. So this time, out of the total 98 vulnerabilities, we see 14 in Microsoft apps. Specifically in Microsoft apps, The product 3D Builder has been affected with 14 vulnerabilities, and with one in Azure and two in Developer Tools. In Developer Tools, we have the vulnerabilities in Visual Studio Code and .NET 6.0. Apart from that, we have 5 vulnerabilities in Microsoft Exchange, 9 in Microsoft Office, out of which one is a critical vulnerability, and one in System Center, and a whopping 66 number of vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows. So out of these 98 vulnerabilities, a total of 66 vulnerabilities have been reported in Microsoft Windows, out of which 10 are critical. We'll talk about them in detail in the later slides. Now let's take a look at the impacts that these vulnerabilities can have. So if left unpatched, 10 of these vulnerabilities can cause denial of service, while 39 can cause elevation of privilege, 10 can cause information disclosure, while others can cause remote code execution, spoofing, and security feature bypass. Talking about the severity of patches this month. So as I already mentioned, that this is quite trying for the IT admins this time, because the patches have been rated as either critical or important. And so there should be no time lost, and the patches should be tested and approved and deployed as soon as possible. Now let's talk in detail about the operating systems and applications patched. So as you can see on the screen, we have operating system and applications starting from Azure, Exchange Server, Windows, Developer Tools, and it continues. First, let's talk about Microsoft Azure. So in Microsoft Azure, we see there's one vulnerability tracked as CVE 2023-21531 and has been rated as important. Moving on to Exchange Server, there are 5 vulnerabilities that can cause elevation of privilege, spoofing, and information disclosure. While luckily none of them are critical, all 5 of them have been rated as important. I'll pause for a few seconds so that you guys can take a screenshot or make a note of the slides. Now moving on to Microsoft Windows, we earlier saw that a total of 66 vulnerabilities have been found in Microsoft Windows, out of which 10 of them are critical ones. And if left unpatched, these vulnerabilities can cause remote code execution, denial of service, elevation of privilege, information disclosure, as well as security feature bypass. So here's a look at the CVIDs of the Microsoft Windows vulnerabilities. The ones that have been marked in red are the critical vulnerabilities. So at this point, I would also like to talk about the vulnerability that is CVE 2023-21726. Now, Microsoft states that the CVE 2023-21726 is a high severity vulnerability in Windows Credential Manager in user interface, and that this vulnerability can cause elevation of privilege and is most likely to be exploited. So the vulnerability can be exploited only locally and has been assigned a CVSS score of 7.8. As of now, although the proof of concept and actual exploitation hasn't been disclosed, please note that it affects all Windows OSs starting from Windows 7 and Server 2008. Hence, although it's not critical, but it is highly recommended that you patch this vulnerability urgently. Moving on to the next set of vulnerabilities, we see a few more critical vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows. Again, the ones that have been marked in red are the critical vulnerabilities. Pausing for a while so that you can make a note of this. Also, folks, if you want this data, you can just visit Manage Engine's Patch Tuesday page. The link for the page will be shared in the chat in a while. You can get all the information about the patches, release, vulnerabilities, as well as the CVIDs right from the Patch Tuesday page. Now, moving on to developer tools vulnerabilities, we see 2 CVIDs for these developer tools vulnerabilities. So the products are .NET 6.0 and Visual Studio Code. And these vulnerabilities can cause remote code execution and denial of service. Again, for Microsoft Office, there are a total of 11 vulnerabilities with one that is critical. And these vulnerabilities can cause security feature bypass, information disclosure, and remote code execution. Taking a look at these vulnerabilities, we see the one that is CVE 2023-21743 marked in red as a critical vulnerability. Now, talking about this, as per Microsoft, So this critical vulnerability in Microsoft SharePoint Server is more likely to be exploited since it has a low complexity and can be easily triggered by an attacker. Now, as for the impact, it can cause security feature bypass, and in a network-based attack, an unauthenticated user could make an anonymous connection to the targeted SharePoint server. So now that we have covered all of the vulnerabilities that have been resolved this Patch Tuesday, let's talk about the last one, that is System Center as well as Microsoft apps. So for System Center, there's just one that can cause elevation of privilege and tracked as CVE 2023 to 1725. And for Microsoft apps, as I already mentioned earlier, the product that has been affected is 3D Builder, which has 14 vulnerabilities. And here are the CVE IDs. All right. Is a look at the third-party updates, some of the third-party updates for Windows that have been released and supported by Manage Engine. This Patch Tuesday, we see major vendors like Google Chrome and Adobe. In addition to this Patch Tuesday, third-party updates were also released by vendors such as Citrix, Fortinet, Cisco, Intel, SAP, and Synology. Let's look at the third-party updates for Mac. So, ladies and gentlemen, all of the information related to the patches released as well as the third-party updates can be seen in Manage Engine's Patch Tuesday forum post. We'll be sharing the Patch Tuesday forum post link in the chat in a while. You can get a complete detail of the patches released this Patch Tuesday. Here's a look at the non-security updates that have mostly been released for Microsoft Office 2016 with their related articles. And we are glad to announce that out of all the patches that have been released this month, a total of 780 patches are supported by Manage Engine's patch management solutions, that is Endpoint Central, Patch Manager Plus, and Vulnerability Manager Plus. Now, although we have talked about the Patch Tuesday breakdown, it's time to show you how you can set up a proper patch management routine in your enterprise's network with Manage Engine's Patch Manager Plus, that is Manage Engine's flagship patch management solution. Before I begin, if you have any queries or questions, I would like to reiterate that you can ask, and the expert panel would be more than happy to answer those queries. And for the ones who have joined late, don't be worried because the webinar is being recorded and we'll be sharing the recording via your registered email IDs in 1 to 2 working days. Okay, so let's move on to the Patch Manager Plus console, where I'll be demonstrating how you can set up a proper patch management routine for your enterprise's network. So this is how the Patch Manager Plus console looks. And I'm using the version 11.1.224.2.7. So on the home screen, you can see the network patch status as well as the system health graph and the missing patches by severity and vulnerability. On the right side of the screen, you can see the latest security news, and these security feeds redirect us to the Manage Engine's Patch Tuesday forum as well as the blogs. So here's a list of the Patch Tuesday updates that were released. You can find the entire list in the forum itself. Okay, so I was talking about setting up a proper patch management routine in your environment. So for that, the first task would be to test and approve the patches. So why you can ask that why do we need to test the patches? Now we have seen in several instances that if the patches are deployed to the enterprise's production machines without proper testing, in case they create anomalies, there are severe network outages as well as productivity drops. To prevent the patches from having any anomalies and as a fail-safe method, it's always imperative that you create a test group and test the patches before deploying them to the production machines. Now let's show you how you can create a test group with Manage Engine's Patch Manager Plus. So for that, we'll first click on deployment from the top menu, and then we'll click on test and approve from the left pane. So here you can see the test groups that have already been created to test patches. Let's create a new group. So the first task is to choose the platform. So you can see that we have Windows, Mac, and Linux. That is, we support patch management for 3 different operating systems. We'll go with Windows for demo right now. And also now the next task is to choose or create a custom group. Now, what is a custom group is that you can create specific customized groups to perform various patch management tasks. For example, let's say testing the patches or creating a custom group of a specific set of computers, that is servers or remote endpoints. Now, first, you can either choose the custom group from a drop-down, or you can create a new custom group by clicking on Create Custom Groups. Now, we'll create a new custom group specifically for the testing and approval of the patches. Click on Create New Group, and then we'll put in the name. Let's say Jan 23. Next, we have to choose the category. So on your screens, you can see that there are three categories, that is static, static unique, and dynamic. Now, for a test and approve group, there is a test group. Always remember that the category should be always static or static unique and never dynamic. Now, you may ask, why not dynamic? So let's see what happens when you click on dynamic. As you can see, a dynamic group is based on a select set of criteria. So let's say we go with operating system equal Windows 11. What happens is when I click on save, the test group would be created with the criteria operating system equals Microsoft Windows 11. So this means any computer, any device in the network that is added to the network with the Microsoft Windows 11 operating system will automatically be made a part of the dynamic group. And as a test group, we definitely don't want that to happen. So for that, we'll either go with static or static unique. Going with static, next step is to choose the computers. You can just click on the computers that need to be chosen on the left pane. And on the right side, you can see that the computers are getting imported. And then we'll click on save. So as you can see, our Jan 23 custom group has been created successfully. Now I was talking about creating a test and approval group. Now that the custom group has been created, let's create a test and approve task feature. So we'll select the custom group from the dropdown that we have just created, Jan 23. Next step is to choose the updates. So we can choose the Microsoft updates as well as third-party updates based on their severities. Going with critical and important for demo. However, you can choose to go with any requirement that your organization requires. Next, you can either choose to patch all the applications, or you can choose to patch specific applications that can be selected from the drop-down, or you can choose to patch all the applications except a few that can be again chosen from the drop-down. For third-party updates, you can choose based on the severities again. We also offer antivirus updates as well as driver updates. Here's a list of the antivirus and driver updates. Once that has been chosen, the next task is to choose the deployment criteria. So you can choose to deploy the patches after n number of days from the vendor release. So if I go with 3, I choose to deploy the patches after 3 days from the vendor release. So this gives us ample time for the patches to be tested and approved before being set and deployed to the production machines. Next task is to choose a deployment policy. You can create a deployment policy by clicking on Create and Modify Policy, or you can just choose one that has already been created. Next, we have an optional setting that is the notification settings. In case you want the testing and approval, the task of the testing and approval to be notified, you can just click on the enable notification and just put in the email ID. We'll be going with the random ID for now. And also use Patch Manager Plus mobile application to notify the technicians that have already configured the app. Once that's done, the last step is to choose whether you want to automatically approve the tested patches after they have been successfully tested in the test groups. For that, we'll just click on the checkbox and we'll put in the number of days. So if I go with 2, it means I choose to automatically approve the tested patches after 2 days. We'll click on create, and we can see that our automate patch deployment group has been created successfully. Now we are done with the testing and approval of patches. So what comes after this? In a proper patch management routine, once the patches have been tested and approved, they have to be deployed to the production machines. So how do we do that? Now you can already, before explaining that, I would like to tell you that, ladies and gentlemen, since this is a product presentation with a short time constraint, I'll be demonstrating a very high level part of the Patch Manager Plus console. So if you have any queries, you can just drop in your email IDs and we can set up a personalized demo for you. All you have to do is just submit your email IDs in the chat. Okay, all right. So I was talking about what happens after the patches have been tested and approved. So once these have been tested and approved, the next step is to deploy the patches. You can either go with the tedious manual deployment, or you can choose to automate the patch deployment task using our automate patch deployment feature. We'll show that in a while. So in order to automate the patch deployment feature, you have to follow two steps. So the first step is to create a deployment policy, that is a schedule when the patches will be deployed to the systems, the days as well as the time span. Once the deployment policy has been created, we can associate the deployment policy to an automate patch deployment task. So let's create a deployment policy. On the left pane, you can see the deployment policies tab. Here's a list of the deployment policies already created. Let's create a new policy. First, we'll name the policy as DP RAN, right? Now we can choose from the two available weekly split types. So you can either go with the regular split, wherein the weeks would be listed as first, second, third, fourth, and last, as well as the days. And also you can choose Manage Engine's exclusive Patch Tuesday based split. So what happens in the based on Patch Tuesday split is that once you click on it, you can see that the weeks have been listed based on first, second, third, and last after the Patch Tuesday. So in that case, if I keep the Patch Tuesday week for the testing of patches, we can choose the first, second, and third weeks for deployment. You can choose in the days and the time span. We'd keep the deployment window as broad as possible. The next task is to download the patches from the server to agent. You can either download them during the deployment window or anytime the agent contacts the server. And next, if you want to initiate the deployment at either the system startup or the refresh cycle, or either of these, whichever happens earlier, you can just choose whichever is applicable. Once you click on Save and Continue, you come to the second step of deployment policy creation, wherein you have to choose the pre-deployment activities. So pre-deployment activities, as the name suggests, it's quite self-explanatory that if you want certain customized activities to happen on the endpoints before deployment, you can just drag and drop them right from the window. If you want to wake the systems connected on LAN, you can just drag and drop them. Or if you want pre-deployment reboot to happen on the systems, you can do that as well. Also, Manage Engine's Patch Manager Plus also offers an exclusive custom script option, wherein if you want certain customized actions to happen on the systems, that is, let's say you want to take a screenshot of the virtual machine that you're running before patch deployment, you can also do that by just creating a script and then adding the script to the script repository. So in the pre-deployment activity, all you have to do is just import the script and add the script arguments and dependency files if necessary, and save and continue. Right, so let's go with pre-deployment reboot for now. So as you can see, we have the option to exclude reboot, that is skip reboot for certain machines that don't require a reboot. That includes servers, as well as if you want, you can notify the users about the reboot, that is the pre-deployment reboot that's about to happen before the patch deployment. So click on Save and Continue. We come to the pre-deployment user notification. So if you want the users to be notified about the deployment that's about to happen to the systems, you can choose to enable the notify option, and you can put in the message as well as the heading as well as the custom message. You can also choose to delay the notification timeout based on the choice you need. And also you can see that we have the option to allow the users to skip the deployment. So in case the users, a group of users, let's say in your organization, is held up with business critical tasks, in that case, forcing deployment to their systems would definitely cause productivity drops. And so for those cases, you can choose to allow the users to skip the deployment. You can also choose to show deployment progress on the client systems. And then we'll click on Save and Continue, and we'll come to the post-deployment activities. So in post-deployment activities, you can either choose to reboot or shut down the machines after the deployment has happened, or again, you can go with the custom script option, and we'll click on Save and Continue. So here's a gist of the deployment policy details, starting from the name as well as the dates as well and dates and the pre and post activities. We click on save and continue. Now our deployment policy has been created successfully. So as I already mentioned earlier, that the creation of an automated patch deployment task, that is, if you want to automate the patch deployment task in your systems, it's a two-step process. When you create a deployment policy, next you automate the patch deployment task by associating the deployment policy. We'll click on automate patch deployment task, automate patch deployment from the left menu, and then we'll click on automate task. We'll go with Windows, and then we'll choose the Microsoft updates based on their severities. Doing the same for third-party updates. If you want, you can choose antivirus updates and driver updates right from here. Next, if you want to deploy the patches after n number of days from either release or approval, you can just specify the number of days. That is, I want to deploy the patches after 2 days from approval. That is, once the patches have been tested and approved, after 2 days, I'll be deploying them. Next, you have to choose the deployment settings. So we have just created a deployment policy. Let's find it out. DPJAN, this is one. And here's a brief gist of the deployment policy. Now, you can also choose to suspend the task after a fixed time. So let's say you create a deployment policy and an automate patch deployment task specifically for the remote users. So after 2-3 months, or let's say a stipulated amount of time, the remote users come back to the organizations. In that case, the automate patch deployment task that has been specifically created for remote users won't be of any value. So for that, you can choose to suspend the task after a particular date as well as time. Next, you can define the target. That is the targets wherein the automate patch deployment task has to happen. And you can also filter out certain targets based on domains, IPs, machine type, as well as the processor architecture and more. Next, you can choose to configure the notifications. That is, if you want to be notified about the download or deployment failure after every n number of hours, you can just click on the box. And if you want detailed reports on these failures to be attached to the mails, you can just choose the attachment format. That is, we've offered 3 different types of format. That is PDF, CSV, as well as XLSX. We'll be going with the email notification, and we'll put a random email ID for demo right now. You can also choose to get notified on the mobile app for those technicians that have already configured the app. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to reiterate that since I have time constraints in this webinar, I'm going with a high-level explanation of the features of Patch Manager Plus. If you want a personalized demo and a customized demo for a feature, you can just drop in your email IDs in the chat box, and our support team will set up a demo session for you as per your convenience. All right, so clicking on save, and we can see out that our automate patch deployment task has been created successfully. So as I was describing how you can set up a proper patch management routine in your enterprise, first we discussed about testing and approval of the patches, and next creation of a deployment policy and automating the patch deployment process. Now, let's talk about another feature, that is the declining of patches. So many a time, what happens is that there arises the need to decline certain applications. Now, let's say you don't want to deploy less critical patches to your machines, but if you choose to ignore them, it will eventually end up affecting the system health compliance. Also, there are certain applications running on other software, that is, they're running on the dependency of other software such as Java, and the latter software might be unsupported once the version has been updated. So what do we do for scenarios like these? So for cases like these, we have the decline patches option available in ManageEngine's Patch Manager Plus. We'll come and we'll click on the patches tab from the top menu, and we'll click on choose decline patch from the left pane. First, we'll create a group. So you can create a group that is a custom group to decline patches, or you can choose one that's already created, going with one that has been created. Next task is to choose the patches. So as you can see, we already offer declining of patches as well as applications and families. So let's go ahead and add a patch. Right, once this window loads up, you can see a list of the patches. Going with random patches for now. So I've added the patches to be declined. Next, I'll do the same for applications, which I don't want to be patched using CC Cleaner and Opera for Mac. And next is the families. So you can choose to decline entire families of applications, starting with Adobe and going with Adobe Flash. And the last step is to check the summary. So you can see that for Windows itself, we have declined 3 patches and 2 families. And for Mac, 3 applications have been declined. We'll just click on save and the decline patch group will be created. So to summarize, as a part of a proper patch management routine, we saw testing and approval of patches, next automating the patch management, and in case there are some patches that need to be declined, the declining of patches. Okay, now coming back to the presentation. We already discussed in the beginning that we'll be sharing some of the best practices that the admins can use for patching their hybrid networks. So here you can see on your screens, starting with the testing on approval of patches. So it's imperative that always you test the patches before deploying them to your production machines. You can create a test group and test the patches. And once the patches have been successfully tested and approved, they can be said that they're safe for deployment to the production machines. Next, always prioritize the deployment of security and critical updates. As we saw this month, out of the 98 vulnerabilities, 11 of these are critical. So it's highly imperative that you prioritize the deployment of critical updates as well as security updates at first. Any other updates such as quality rollups and updates of lower severity can be deployed later based on the normal patching schedules. Number third is always synchronize the patching schedules with the monthly patch Tuesdays. So what happens is that when you synchronize the patching schedule with monthly patch Tuesdays, you get a head start because as soon as the patches are released, they can be tested. That is, I demonstrated earlier. You can test the patches during the patch Tuesday week itself, and on the subsequent weeks, you can deploy the patches to the systems. Next, always set broad deployment windows for remote machines and non-business hours for office machines, that is servers, because as admins, sysadmins, we have to always strike the fine balance between productivity as well as security. So although we have to secure the endpoints in the network, but it is our job to ensure that there's no productivity drop because of the patch management or security, cybersecurity procedures in the network. And lastly, you can allow the users to postpone the deployments and reboots. So as we already saw that in case a group of your users are held up with critical business tasks, so forcing the patch deployment on them might create issues with productivity. And in that case, it's recommended that you allow the users to postpone the deployments. Now we also have an ebook for the best practices for patch management, which you can download from the link that has been shared in the chat. So once you click on the link, you can get a free copy of the patch management best practices guide that will be of enough value, I believe, in patching hybrid networks. Now, dear folks, we'll be moving on to the live question and answer session. But before that, as you can see on your screen, we have the solutions that ManageEngine offers for seamless patch management, starting with our flagship product, that is Endpoint Central, which is a unified endpoint management and security solution. We also happen to have an MSP version of the product. Next, we have Patch Connect Plus that smoothly integrates with SCCM and Intune to ensure third-party patching. And then we have Vulnerability Manager Plus that can be used to scan and mitigate vulnerabilities and compliance issues in the network. And lastly, we have Patch Manager Plus, our standalone patch management solution to ensure seamless patching across the network. So dear guests, we are open for live question and answers. So in case if you have any queries regarding the patch management procedures or our presentation or any of our products, please feel free to ask. Myself as well as the technical panel would be more than happy to answer your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, you can ask questions based on the patch management procedures or any of our products or the webinar in general. We'll be more than happy to answer. All right, so we have a question from Amaru where it said, surely when an update deployment is done in some equipment, it gives errors. How could these errors be corrected? So I would like to state you that, could you please elaborate your query because it's a bit ambiguous. Could you kindly mention what equipments give errors and what patches have been deployed? We can surely take a look at the errors. Mark says, this is my first ME webinar, and yeah, I already know how to create a test and deploy demo. Is this a one-off, or I wanted to see more info on the patches? Sure, Mark, if you need more info on the patches as well as any of the patch management best practices, please feel free to ask. We demonstrate the patch manager console, and we also demonstrate the best practices for the admins out here so that they can have a vivid understanding of how to create a proper cyber hygiene routine for their enterprises environment. So if you have any queries, please feel free to ask Mark regarding the patches as well as the patch use in general. Okay, so Teddy asks, is there an option to update the Windows version, such as I have some Windows 10 on older versions and I want to bring them to the latest? Yeah, surely, Terry. We offer the feature pack updates, that is feature packs for Windows 10 22H2 as well as Windows 11 21H2 and 22H2. So all you have to do is that go to the patches tab and find the supported patches. All right, I'll just demonstrate this to Terry. Okay, so you can update the feature packs in the Patch Manager Plus console itself. Let me just go there. Okay, so we'll click on patches, and then we'll choose the supported patches. So right from the supported patches view, that is the patches that are supported in your network, you can choose the Windows 11 feature packs or the Windows 10 feature packs. I hope that answers your question, Teddy. Okay, Mr. Venugopal says, I would like to have a one-on-one best practice session. Sure, Mr. Venugopal, we would be more than happy to create a demo session for you. Also, for now, you can take a look at our ebook of the best practices for patch management, and you can drop in your email ID so that we can set up a demo session for you. Devon says, I had to walk away to troubleshoot where I can find the recording. Yeah, surely the webinar is being recorded. And as I already mentioned, the recording would be available in 1 to 2 working days and we'll be sharing the recording via email to your registered email IDs. So ladies and gentlemen, we are still open for questions. And in case you liked our webinar, you can rate the webinar from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. Once you close the webinar, you can get the survey form where you can rate the webinar from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. Also, if you have any more queries, please feel free to ask. All right, I see Fernando sharing his email ID. Okay, surely Fernando will set up a one-on-one session for you. Dear guests, if you have any more queries or if you want a product demo, just feel free to drop in your email IDs in the chat box. You can also ask more questions. So we have a question from Rigoberto. The Stern host used by Zoho.com on the Snort 2 C hosts which cause firewalls and IPs to be blocked. I'm afraid that your question is a bit ambiguous, Rigoberto. I would request you to clarify your question. I would be more than happy and more than willing to answer your question. Could you please elaborate the question? All right, got it. It's not a question. Okay, sure. Okay, Ozil says, how often would you say patches end up causing issues instead of fixing issues? I would like to skip the testing of patches. So the thing is that Ozil, the patches are released by the specific vendors, let's say Adobe or Microsoft or Citrix. So it's up to the vendors how they would create the patches. And more than the patches being faulty, there are certain times because of the environment, the patches can turn out to be faulty and show anomalies. So it's always the best practice to test the patches before deploying them to the production environments. Okay, Mr. Frederick asks, do you have a link on how to update patches in an offline environment? Surely, Mr. Frederick, we offer the patch management for closed networks, that is DMZ zones. So we'll be sharing the link for the related article on how you can patch a closed network in a while in your chat. Ozil, as I was saying, since you asked how often that you would like to skip the patches, so as I was already saying that there's no proper guarantee that the patches won't break up because it's based on the respective vendors, that is Microsoft as well as the Adobe or other third-party updates. So as a fail-safe method, we offer that you can test the patches in a test group so that once they have been deployed to the production environments, they don't cause any abnormalities or anomalies. Okay, we have another question from Mr. Spencer. Sometimes my patches stall or say they are not applicable, even though they are critical patches. Is it possible that the computer already applied the patch and that is why it's not applicable? Yeah, that can surely be one reason that why it's not applicable. Also, the other reason why the patch is not applicable is because the product for which the patch is present, it might not have been installed in the endpoints in your network. For those issues, it can always say that the patch is not applicable. All right, Ozil, thank you so much. Glad to know that it helped. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any more queries, please feel free to ask. And if you're leaving the session, if you're exiting the webinar, please don't forget to rate the webinar from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. If you have liked the webinar, and also if you have any more feedback, please feel free to drop it. Once you close the webinar, you'll get the demo request form. So if you want to have a product demo, you can just drop in your email IDs in the chat, or you can just click on the demo request button. Okay, Sandy, really sorry that we missed your question. So Sandy says, I keep asking the same question. I don't know if you're receiving it. Really sorry, since we had a lot of questions, we missed your question. So the question is, when I compare patches that are missing for endpoints through IVM and compare them with managing. All right, it's a different question by Mr. Venugopal. I'll come back to it. To answer Sandy's question, just find your question. Yeah. How do you match the patches you see in Endpoint Central or Patch Manager Plus to the CVID of the vulnerability? In other words, how do you know which vulnerabilities are being addressed by the patches you deploy in Endpoint Central? So currently, Sandy, we don't have the mechanism, but it's actually in our roadmap to map the CVIDs along with the patches. I hope that answers your question. And coming back to Mr. Venugopal's question, when I compare patches that are missing for endpoints through IVM and compare them with Manage Engine, I found some vulnerabilities are missing in MEDC. I've already reported this to your team. Not sure why these are missing in ME. So Mr. Venugopal, we support almost 95% of the available patches in the market. But currently, there are some patches that we don't support, and these are in our roadmap. We'll be giving you an update when all of these patches are supported. But for now, if you feel that you are missing some patches, you can just drop in our support team, or you can just share the patches IDs that you need to be deployed in your systems right here in the chat. Our support team will take a look at it for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, we are nearing the end of the session. So if you have many queries, please feel free to ask via chat. We'll be more than happy to answer it. And if you are exiting the webinar, kindly rate it from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best if you have liked the webinar. Okay, so I believe there are not many questions. In that case, we'll be closing the webinar in the next couple of minutes. So again, I would like to reiterate that if you have any queries regarding patch management, or you want a product demo, or you want to know about our webinar, please feel free to ask via chat. All right, dear folks. So now we'll be closing the webinar given the fact that there are no more questions. So if you still want a product demo, you can just drop in your email IDs in the chat, or you can click on the demo button and submit your email IDs in the survey form once you close the webinar. Also, if you have liked the webinar, kindly don't forget to rate it from 1 to 5, with 5 being the best. And also you can submit your feedback if you want further improvements in the webinar and the presentation. All right, so see you again next month. Goodbye.